Hey, it's Dougie from Valto, and in today's webinar, I'm going to be showing you some real-world ways that I use Microsoft 365 Copilot every day. So these are going to be some examples that range different types of things, but rather than it being something that's like a full long story, I thought I'd just kind of show a whole bunch of different types of examples of how I'm using Microsoft Copilot, because I still find now people using Copilot come up with all sorts of different ways that they use it, and little shortcuts and hacks, life hack type things. So I thought I'd just go through some of my favorite ones today. So let's make a start. So rough kind of agenda. The areas that we're going to be looking at are going to be categorized into boosting productivity, so hacks that you can use Copilot to help boost day-to-day productivity. Some tips around content creation, so marketing types of tips, as well as collecting feedback, and how we can kind of use Copilot for collecting feedback and analyzing the feedback. And then at the end, I'm going to talk a bit about how you can get your hands on a free Copilot readiness assessment, which is something that's just fully funded by Microsoft, but basically will help you determine where you're up to in terms of rolling out Copilot and how ready your organization is for that. That is something that Valto can help support you through. As I say, it's fully funded by Microsoft. I'll talk a bit more about it at the end, but Valto are Microsoft solutions partners, and we have a accreditation for our specialists in adoption and change management. So boosting productivity. So the first example I have for boosting productivity is around creating task lists from our emails. So what I've got here is a prompt that I've put into Copilot, which says, from the emails in my inbox, can you identify the tasks that are needed to be progressed? Write up the tasks in a table with columns for the task name, the due date, and action required. And you can see here then it's gone away and it's created me a table based on emails that it's found with some ideas of due dates based on what has been inside of those particular emails. Now, we can take that a step further as well. So for example, here I'm putting, please reorder the table in a priority order. So at the moment, those due dates are all over the place, whereas actually I could tell it to rewrite it, and now you can see that the tasks list has been presented back to me in a nice sort of prioritized way, with the ones which have got the closest due dates being displayed across the top. Now, we could do this technically with any types of tasks which we've been given, not just emails. So if there's any tasks that have been given to us during Teams meetings, in Teams messages that have been sent to us, Copilot is going to be aware of all of those things as well. So we could ask it to include a lot of other kind of task areas as well. So I say it has access to everything that we have access to, including our emails, our messages, Teams, posts, SharePoint, OneDrive, things like that. We can create tables and dictate what appears inside of those tables. So if we want to add more columns to that, we can do. If we want to do a reorder the columns, and we can ask it to reorder by alphabetical of the task name, who maybe group it by who's gave us the task. So many different ways that we can do this, but just to give you a bit of an example of how I'm using this. I also use a very similar type of prompt on a weekly basis, quite often at the end of the week or the beginning of the week when I'm kind of planning out what I'm going to be doing for the next week. I'll use a prompt which is very similar to this, which will be something along the lines of what tasks has somebody given to me? Or let's say, for example, I'm going to go into a one-to-one meeting with somebody. I might just ask for a little recap from Copilot, say, what did I speak to this person about last time? What actions were there for this meeting? And just make sure I've got everything prepped and ready to go. It's a fantastic way of prepping, essentially. So next then, we've got recapping Teams meetings. Now, again, from a kind of prepping point of view, this is a fantastic tool that we can go to any Teams meeting that's been recorded, either the video recorded or just the transcriptions been recorded, and then we can actually use Copilot against that meeting to ask specific questions. So it might be, say, what tasks have been assigned to me? So again, if I was to be jumping into a specific meeting, so in this case it's our product strategy meetings, I would go to that first, maybe the day or so before, and ask what tasks have been assigned to me, so I can just double check that everything that was asked of me in that meeting I've followed up with, I've had in my to-do, and I've actually progressed. So it helps us find tasks that has been assigned to us. We can go to the meeting, as I say, hit that recap, and we can see not only kind of like the meeting notes in here, but if we were to click on the mentions button, we can see anywhere that we've been mentioned, anywhere that's used our name. So that's actually really good, especially if we're wanting to recap a meeting that we didn't attend. So say, for example, I was on holiday, I was sick that day, I couldn't actually attend the meeting. I could go back and recap it and see where my name was mentioned. As I see, a list of the meeting notes, minutes and actions, all nicely summarized. And this is a fantastic way to catch up on meetings, as I say, that you haven't attended. You can ask Copilot questions about the specific meeting. So it might be, say, what tasks have been assigned to me, but it could also be what decisions have been made in the meeting. What was the tone of the meeting? Was anyone frustrated in the meeting? Was everyone happy in the meeting? What are people most excited about? So all these things are sort of contextual questions, but Copilot is fully aware of exactly what was discussed in the meeting, the tone of the meeting, and anywhere that as I say, if someone was showing any emotions, if they were frustrated or happy, again, you can drill into that to kind of understand a bit more about that. And in fact, actually, I joke about this sometimes, but there was a real example of this where once we were trying to record a demo video of Copilot, and we had this fake meeting with a few of us from Valto, where we tried to simulate what a meeting would look like so that we could record a video like this to have meeting actions and meeting notes and things like that. And we wanted to test this kind of theory of whether it would recognize the kind of tone of voice and things like that. So we had one of the people in the meeting pretend that they were really angry and said, this isn't good enough and this has to be X, Y, Z and blah, blah, blah. And then we went to the meeting's AI summary afterwards. And it was that clever that it realized what we were doing, and it actually listed out to say the person's name that we had do it. It listed out to say this person was pretending to be annoyed for the basis of using this AI recap feature. So it had been listening to what we were doing, and it was actually fully aware of the full context that we were trying to spoof it, essentially. So it is very clever, very powerful. Next on the productivity, we've got company policy questions. Now, this is fantastic because what it does, Copilot has access to everything you have access to. So if you have a well-structured document library, let's say in SharePoint, so you've got a knowledge base in SharePoint, or you've got a policy library in SharePoint, it means then that employees can use Copilot to ask specific questions to surface up information from the business. So in this case, I'm asking Copilot, say, how many days of annual leave do I get every year at Valto? Now, what this is going to do is going to go away and start looking for the annual leave policy. I've not asked it to look for the annual leave policy, but it's understood my question. It's gone to look for it, and then it's found the annual leave policy. Just going to pause the video here. It's found the annual leave policy that's stored inside of SharePoint, and it said at Valto all employees receive 25 days of paid holiday each year. In addition to that is 8 public bank holidays. This means you get 33 days of annual leave. Additionally, Valto offers flexible holiday scheme that allows you to buy or sell up to 5 days of your annual holiday entitlement to better match your individual circumstances and lifestyle. Now, this is all true. This is all exactly true. And it's pulled this information, and it even shows you with these little numbers here where it sourced this information from. So it's pulled off flexible holidays policy. It's pulled off employee benefits handbook and some other additional resources as well that's found from our intranet, and it's cobbled together the right answer in its most simplistic form. Now you can actually see what I love about this as well is Copilot also has some additional suggestions to help keep this conversation flowing forward. So it says here, how do I apply for the flexible holiday scheme, or can I carry over any unused holidays to the next year? Are there any restrictions on when I can take my holidays? So these are all very common FAQ type of things which people ask all of the time, and we can click on those buttons to automatically ask that question. And in the video here, I'm just showing you these are the different resources that it's pulling up. But once I click on one of those buttons, it would then enter that. So say, for example, can I carry over the holidays in the next year, it's going to then put that question in. It's looking for that. No one's told it necessarily that look for that, but it's obviously quite intelligent and picked up on these are the types of questions that people would typically ask. And then it's come back with an intelligent response, which is yes, at Valzo, you can carry over up to 3 days of unused holiday into the next year. And you can see where it's pulled this from. So we have employment law, and some of our contract information, some of our policy documents. It's pulled all of that together and it's found the right information and presented it back to us as an end user. So we can refine our questions. As I say, Copilot even provides suggested prompts. It understands the questions and it relates. Say, for example, the other thing which is interesting here is that it understands that the question relates to holiday allowance known as annual leave. But this shows how that Copilot AI, we could have asked the question in so many different ways to have it find the information for us. So I could have asked to say, how many holidays do I have? How many annual leave days do I have? There's multiple ways I could have asked that question. Whereas in traditional forms of search, like if I was to use a search bar inside of SharePoint, that would only ever be able to find where you've used that exact word. So if I went into SharePoint and put in annual leave, if our policies refer to it as holidays rather than annual leave, it's going to have a tough time finding that because it's only really looking for the words, not contextual. Whereas Copilot fully understands the human language and what it is that we're actually saying. So I say traditional search would need to be well maintained just to look for specific words in a title or content of a document, whereas Copilot is much more flexible than that. The answer is leveraged from our SharePoint policies library, so it's known as a controlled document system. We do have a pre-built policy management system, which is known as our controlled document system, and that works really nicely with this because we've got all of our documents in one place. And our control document system manages policies, so it makes sure that documents stay reviewed on a periodic basis, to get approved on a periodic basis, to make sure that all the information stays up to date, and we're purging off anything which we no longer need. Because this example here that I'm showing you of Copilot really highlights the importance of how important it is to have well-maintained documents. We don't want ever Copilot to surface out-of-date information. So if, say, for example, and this is something that we would cover off in the kind of the Copilot readiness assessment with you, but let's say, for example, you had a load of documents which everybody knew, all the employees knew, oh, those are old policy documents, we don't ever look at those. But the thing is, Copilot doesn't know that, so it's going to surface up that type of information. So if you've got old policy information living somewhere inside of your Microsoft 365, you would need to make sure that that was cleansed, purged, or you can also tell Copilot which SharePoint sites to look at and which ones to ignore, but that needs to be all part of that configuration. Otherwise, you're going to run into problems where it's surfacing up outdated information to people. I should also pause as well to say, if you've got any questions as we go through, please do use the FAQ feature, which is across the top if you're watching live. If you're watching this as a recording afterwards on YouTube, you can leave any questions in the comments feed below. And I'm going to be answering questions as we go along. Cool. So next. So it looks like there's one question that's just dropped in the Q&A. So I'm just going to look at this. So how much can you in the free version versus paid version? So just to quickly summarize that, everything that I'm showing to you in today's session, nearly all of it would require a license. It would require the paid version of Copilot, which is roughly $30 per month at the time of recording of this video, which is roughly about 23 British pounds, something like that. The easiest way to explain the difference of the free version of Copilot versus the paid for version is that if you want it to interact with your Microsoft 365 data, as in SharePoint documents, OneDrive documents, Teams messages, Teams meetings, all that sort of stuff, you will need a Copilot premium license to do that. If you just want the chat interface and you just want to ask questions and it's getting answers from the web, as in the web, the just like a Google search would get information from the web. Then you can use the free version. But any of the stuff I'm showing you where we're creating documents, we're pulling documents, it's pulling information about me and the way that I work. It all requires a premium license. So hopefully that answers that question. If you've got any other questions, by the way, guys, please do use the Q&A feature across the top over here and drop any questions in. I'll try and answer them as we go along. So the next example, and this actually, to be totally honest, it was this example which inspired this webinar that I thought, rather than I have another Copilot webinar which is happening in a few weeks' time, which is almost like the story of how Valto use it end to end as a consultancy team, whereas today was more about little examples. But it was this example that inspired this webinar, because this is the one that, if anything, is probably my favorite example. But it's all about finding things, finding documents. So this was actually inspired by a real world example where I was looking for a specific PowerPoint document, or oops, sorry, let's pause this. So what I asked Copilot was, I knew that there was a PowerPoint that I'd created for a webinar. I did a webinar about 2 years ago, which was all about when to use SharePoint, or when you should store documents in SharePoint, when should you store documents in Microsoft Teams versus when you should store documents inside of OneDrive. And a customer was asking me about this as a concept, and I just wanted to pull out the PowerPoint. I just couldn't find where the PowerPoint lived. It had been a few years sort of thing since I'd last seen it. And I looked everywhere, and I actually spent a good half an hour, and sometimes I know people that spend even longer than that looking for documents. I just couldn't find it anywhere. So actually I went to Copilot and I said, well, where is the PowerPoint that I worked on for this webinar? And this is roughly what it is. And then it's returned back to me the exact document I want, which is a SharePoint versus Teams webinar. And the thing which I found really interesting about this is, and I actually understood why it was that I couldn't find this document, was because that document actually predated when we had a proper structure for where we store all of our kind of PowerPoints related to webinars and things like that. It kind of predated a lot of that stuff, and it lived actually inside of my colleague. So my colleague, her name is Jade. It lived inside of her OneDrive, and she shared that document to me as a link to say, hey, here's the PowerPoint that I've created for your webinar. Or she's branded it up essentially. And that's where the document, the latest version of the document lived, was still inside of our OneDrive. It hadn't been moved into a shared space. But because she had shared that link with me, I technically had access to that file. Obviously, I'd forgotten that a couple of years ago, she had shared a link to this particular file with me, and I'd completely forgotten about it. But Copilot knew that. As I say, when we think about accessing documents, as a human, we think of it as a very rigid, almost two-dimensional type of way that we look at things, whereas actually Copilot will look at how it searches for documents almost like in a complete 3D type of model, where it can see every avenue of every document that you have ever been able to access. So again, this comes back to that point of, you might have access, or your employees might have access to documents that you don't realize that they have access to, but Copilot will understand that they have access to it. So say, for example, if this document had been something that was a bit more, I don't know, confidential, let's say, for example, this contained all the information about every employee's salary or something like that within there. Now, if I was going into Copilot and I typed in, oh, what's the salary of our CEO or something like that, if that file had been previously shared in a public space, but no one realized that, Copilot would know that, and you'd be able to go and get that information, pull it back and go, here you go, here's the exact information that you asked for about the CEO's salary, for example. So this is why, as part of this kind of free Copilot assessment, the readiness assessment, we talk to you about the security that you've got set up of your Microsoft 365, your SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, things like that, to make sure that there's no leakage and there's no oversharing, is what the term is referred to. So as I say, this is a new way of interfacing, finding documents. So if you go back to the very beginning of kind of when people were working with computers in the office and things like that, you would have kind of typical folder structures and things like that, file shares, and that was the way that you'd find things in kind of folder structures. Then we had kind of the next era, which was more like SharePoint, which was essentially a intranet, and you'd have nice big buttons and interactive ways that you could navigate, or you could use a search bar. And as I say, if you knew the exact names of the documents or keywords, it would then pull those out, and that was like kind of the next iteration. This new AI era is now bringing it so we don't even need to leave this chat interface. We can do everything from here. We can find things, we can create things, we can edit things. We can do everything inside of this one interface. So it's a brand new way that people are going to be using to find documents. So this allows us to roughly describe the documents. So I found documents like this in so many ways when I'm not even, I mean, with this example, I roughly knew what the title of the webinar was. Whereas in the past before, I've sometimes described a document at a very high level to say, I know there was a document, I can't even remember if it was a Word document, PDF, PowerPoint, I can't even remember what it was, but I know that it had some information about X, Y, and Z. Or maybe I've said, I'm fairly certain that I worked on this file with X person, I worked on it with Joe Blogs. Can you help me find that particular document? So as Copilot has access to everything we have access to, it can look everywhere in a few seconds, far quicker than we ever could. As I say, this real world example, I spent a long time looking through all my SharePoints, all of my Teams, my own OneDrive spaces, loads of stuff, and I couldn't find it. And it was only when I asked Copilot, did it really help me kind of uncover where that document lived. So even to other users on OneDrive, so as I say, when they've shared stuff with us, we can access all those shared links. And I said this was a real world example, and I thought it was a fantastic way of showing exactly how, because I think that with Copilot, I always think even if you could just save yourself 30 minutes a day, Copilot would very quickly pay for itself, very quickly. And this is one of the fantastic ways that you could easily save yourself 30 minutes a day, or even if it was a couple of times a week, or maybe even once a week, it would still go towards that kind of quota of how you're saving time on a day-to-day basis. So I'm just going to check the Q&A, just see, I think there's a couple more questions which have dropped in. How quickly Copilot updates the index of the content after new doc added in OneDrive, SharePoint, or meeting done? Good question. I don't actually know the exact time off the top of my head, and I don't think it's necessarily even a Copilot thing. It's more necessarily of how Microsoft 365 has indexed in the search crawl. And I would say that documents and meeting minutes and stuff would all be very different. A meeting, depending on how long the meeting is, you're talking minutes to get that sorted. With a document, if you were searching for it in the way that I was searching for it, I would probably think something more somewhere between 30 minutes to 40 minutes, something like that I would have thought, for it to properly index it. But I've not really tested that, to be honest. Another question. There we go. I did notice the public share content that should be private. How do I check or audit security and privacy level for existing content live in SharePoint or OneDrive? So there's a number of ways that you can do that. There's some new premium, like everything in Microsoft, some premium features in SharePoint. So we've got SharePoint premium features for advanced kind of security checks and things like that, which is included as part of Copilot licenses as well. So it's probably worth checking those out. And also a lot of those types of security related concerns and questions is something that we dive into a lot in the free Copilot readiness assessment that I was talking about. We'll talk a bit more about at the end. Okay, cool. If you do have any other questions, as I drop them into the Q&A feature, and we'll answer them as we go along. So next is Copilot inside of SharePoint. So we've looked at using Copilot in the Teams interface for searching and finding things inside of Teams, but we can actually use this to actually find things inside of SharePoint as well. So if I just play this, so you can see here we've got create an FAQ. We've got summarize key highlights, or we can say, how can I use these resources? So this is actually going to go and summarize the SharePoint site for us, and we can actually see all of the kind of key things which we can find on the SharePoint site. So we can use Copilot against SharePoint to discover contents of a SharePoint site and what the resources on that site can be used for. We can search for individual documents. So for example, here I've said, where is our document about a sort of policy? And it's then pulled up our data protection policy, because I've asked where's this. It's found it as a page, and then I can click through to that to then find the full information and open up the actual document. So we can search the whole site, we can search for individual documents, and knowing that you have seen a specific document on a specific SharePoint site means that when you go there to search, you're refining it and you're only going to be finding content on that SharePoint site. We can ask questions about the SharePoint site to find out information that it contains. And in time, not right now, but in time, I imagine it'll be the Copilot search will be more than just documents and pages, but potentially for IT admins, it could be things like searching for who is the top content creator on this SharePoint site. When was this SharePoint site created? Where is the storage being used on this SharePoint site? Those are types of things. That information exists inside of Microsoft 365 and SharePoint, but I imagine in time, more and more features, more and more things are going to come out that Copilot is going to be able to get access to. Cool. As I say, if you've got any questions, drop into Q&A. I can't see in there just yet, so I'm going to move on to the next section, which is all about content creation. Now, I've been working a lot with kind of more the marketing side of things recently, and that a lot of that stuff comes with setting up webinars, creating blog articles, and doing loads of kind of creative related things to support the marketing materials. So I've been using Copilot a lot for a lot of these things and found a few different kind of life hacks, so to speak. So the first is ideas for content. Now, if you speak to any creative person, they can say that quite often the biggest roadblock is actually coming up with ideas. And I love using Copilot to actually come up with ideas. And I use it as a way of kind of bouncing off almost like it's a colleague essentially. So the Copilot, the reason why it's called Copilot and not Autopilot, as in it's not just doing it for you, Copilot is supposed to be like a virtual assistant or a virtual colleague who you can bounce ideas with. So as a real world example here, I've said, write a bullet point list of 10 eye-catching webinar titles for Microsoft Copilot. So you can see here, I've then got this to write me out a list of kind of eye-catching titles. So unlocking productivity, mastering Microsoft Copilot, the future of work, exploring Microsoft Copilot. So some of these are quite high level, and in real life, to be honest, I would be bouncing ideas with it backwards and forwards. I'll say, make it sound a little bit more like this, or some of those are a little bit cheesy. So I would give it a few more ideas, or maybe even inspire it by giving it some previous webinar ideas or titles that I've liked in the past before, and get it to generate some more. So it's really good for that kind of ideation, that ideas creation. It stops writer's block and gets those ideas flowing using Copilot. You can tell Copilot as well to take the role. Say, for example, you could say, take the role of a seasoned chief marketing officer or a YouTuber with loads of kind of experience about creating videos. And that will actually narrow its focus, and it will change its response types. And some would argue to also make it a little bit more knowledgeable about a certain area, because it's hyper focusing about one particular topic or one particular area. So you can tell it to take the role of somebody that you would probably ask in this type of scenario. And now it's not just about kind of getting ideas for webinars, but you can get ideas for all sorts of stuff. Your blog articles, webinars, videos, maybe even email campaigns. All sorts of different things that you potentially want to come up with ideas for. And it's not just coming up with the ideas for the titles either. You could get it to draft something out for you as a kind of first draft. There's loads of things you could use it for. And it's not even just for content ideas either. Like if I've got a new idea about how I'm thinking of creating a new marketing campaign or something like that, I'll go to Copilot and say, take the role of a chief marketing officer and look over my plan here. What do you think of this plan? pick holes in it. Tell me what you think of it. I've done it in the past before where we run a lot of paid ads, and I've given it information about the paid ads that we've run, and I've said to it, which ones, if you were a CMO, which of these ads out of the 5 that we've run, which 3 would you run again? And then it's analyzed it and come back and say, well, actually, by looking at the spend of these particular ads, these 2 or 3 did the best, and if I had X budget, that's where I'd invest it in. And it gave me its reasons why it thought that. So I found that really useful. And again, it's another way that we can kind of bounce ideas off somebody else. So as I want, once I've kind of chosen a title, I can ask to flesh it out as well. So I could ask it to create a first draft of the agenda, perhaps ask it to then write out an email campaign or blog to help promote that particular webinar in this case. We could also use it to say maybe create some social posts for us as well. So we could say write a LinkedIn post for us. Now, when I'm asking it to write a LinkedIn post, I'm giving you a bit of a better example of a prompt here, because I'm asking it to create a LinkedIn post using a very specific formula. So I've said, I want you to write me a LinkedIn post about Microsoft Copilot. It should follow the following formula. First sentence must be eye-catching and emotive to a viewer. Then there should be a bullet point list of 5 key points. It should then include a 1-sentence true statistic about Microsoft Copilot, then a call to action to reach out to me for a free Copilot readiness assessment. So it's got that idea of the formula. I've been very specific with what I want it to write. I'm using a winning formula that I know that works. And then there we go, it's drafted something for me. Now, typically with this, I would probably ask it to say, maybe remove some of the emojis, things like that, or different ways I might want it to sound. But I'm going to say rewrite this to make it sound in the tone of voice of, and then you can choose a celebrity or somebody that's well known. So I'm saying please rewrite this into the tone of voice of Ryan Reynolds. It's then going to then obviously Ryan Reynolds is obviously a sort of comedy type of film actor, very jokey, but his social media uses very informal, jokey kind of tone of voice. So it's reworded this now to make this sound a lot more like an informal, approachable, less serious type of post. So it sounds a lot better essentially. Now again, in time, I think that Copilot will understand our own tone of voice, and very soon I think you'll be able to tell it to say, please make this sound more like me, and it'll understand more about you, the way that you write and things like that, and it'll formulate that tone of voice much better for you. So as I say, this is a fantastic way to produce the ideas, flesh them out, combine them with sort of the LinkedIn scheduling feature as well, and you can actually use this to get ahead of your social posting. So you could draft out a load of ideas with this. Now, when it comes to kind of LinkedIn posts, it doesn't matter hugely if it was all 100% AI. Not like if it was a blog post, like posting to your website, it would hurt the SEO of your website, basically it would hurt the organic search if it was just 100% AI. Not so much with LinkedIn posts and social media posts, but you probably still want to edit it to make it sound a little bit more like you and what it is that you post on social media. So next, we got creating a blog article. So as I said, we can take these ideas and then we can get them to be created as a LinkedIn post, as a blog article, and so forth. So let's click play here. So now I can say, now write the above, so that LinkedIn post, into a 1,000-word blog article. Now, this is where it's then going to, as I flesh this out a lot more, give a lot more information about those particular key points. You can see here it's kept all the kind of same kind of headers and the key kind of areas, but it's fleshed out a lot more. Now, this is where I'd say reuse Copilot's current train of thought to spin up additional content, meaning if it's already thinking about something, like you've started off by thinking about a webinar, Then you move on, say, keeping the same conversation, keeps the same train of thought. Then you've asked it to create a LinkedIn post about it. Then you've asked it to create a blog article about it. It keeps all of that conversation, all that train of thought going in one place. And it means it's easier, ties the kind of messaging together, because it knows you're not having to explain yourself multiple times about what it is, the context that you're wanting Copilot to write about. But you can ask it to refine it. Maybe, say, for example, if this was a blog article we were posting on our website, we might want to include certain keywords. So we might want to say, please make sure that you include the keywords Microsoft Copilot or Copilot licenses, for example. And then essentially you would probably, again, you wouldn't want to post this 100% as AI. You would still need to go away and edit this yourself, to put it into your own tone of voice, but also to make sure that Google doesn't flag it as AI content. But essentially, you've got 60% of your article here that's created for you, and all you need to do is go away and sort of edit the last 30 to 40% of it. So I'm just going to take a quick look before we move on to the next one, if there's any questions in the Q&A area. We've got one question in here, so have a quick look. How to integrate/import other knowledge-based content from outside Microsoft 365, like Azure DevOps, Google Docs, so that Copilot is able to utilize the search and content creation, Copilot Studio or other service or tools. You've basically answered your own question there. Copilot Studio is what you would need to do if you wanted to truly integrate those external data sources into Copilot. But to be totally honest with you, if you can get as much natively inside of Microsoft 365, it's just going to make things a lot easier. It's going to make it cheaper. It means that you don't have to do so much advanced development and things like that. So say, for example, if you've got Google Docs, migrate them into SharePoint. It'd be way easier to do that, and have Copilot overlook all of those documents inside SharePoint than it is trying to run some kind of halfway house where you've got a bit of Microsoft and a bit of Google. But of course, I'm a Microsoft guy, so I would say that. But truly, if you could get the information mostly inside of Microsoft, you'll save yourself a lot of headaches. Cool. As I say, if there's any more questions, drop them into Q&A and we'll answer them as we go along. So the next one is creating images. Now, this is really quite a powerful thing, and it's actually, although I don't think it works particularly well just yet, you can also create videos. I'm anticipating, because this is something quite new to Copilot, as I say, this is February of 2025 that we recorded this. Maybe if you ask me in June or July of 2025, the video sort of creation would probably be a lot better, but the image creation is really good, really good at this point in time. So let's take a little example of this. So actually, there's an area inside of Copilot that's called Visual Creator, which basically switches the kind of the mindset, the approach of Copilot to being about creating visuals rather than working with text and things like that. So once we've switched into this area, I've said to it, create an image of a desk within an office. On the screen of the computer on the desk is the word Copilot. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because if you imagine if we had been creating a LinkedIn post, or we were creating blog articles, or whatever it was we were creating previously using Copilot, we probably would want not just pure text to be posted, we'd more than likely want imagery to be posted alongside that LinkedIn post or that blog article, things like that. So I've met a lot of people who are not particularly, well, not everybody is a graphic designer. Not everybody is going to be able to create their own images. So using something like Copilot is really useful in that scenario. So now we can say, create this image for us. We asked it to say, create an image of a desk within a home office. On the desk of the computer is the word Copilot. So say this is really helpful for those who struggle with creating imagery for presentations and marketing materials. I would say be very specific with your prompt. What do you want in the image and not want in the image? Tell it a specific style maybe, or colors you want it to use. But there you go, it's created as an image, and I would actually use that image. I think it's really nice. I like the colors, and I think it's nailed it on really well of what that image should be. So as I say, be very specific about what you want inside the image, but also what you don't want to be in the image as well. Really define it. The more information you can give it, the better. And in fact, if you wanted it to look like a specific image, I've actually done something similar recently where I wanted long story short, I wanted to have an image which was of an IKEA shop, but instead of the word IKEA being on it, I wanted it to have the word SharePoint on it. Now, this was because I was creating a video which was basically along the lines of, if I was to create the SharePoint site for IKEA, this is what it would look like. And I wanted my thumbnail for my YouTube video to be of an IKEA site, IKEA shop with the word SharePoint instead of IKEA on it. Now, when I asked Copilot to create an image of a shop that looked like IKEA, it actually flagged up and said, sorry, we've got copyright issues here. We can't do that. So what I did is I reverse engineered it. I uploaded the image of an IKEA shop to Copilot and said, please describe this image in a way that you would be able to recreate the image from its description. It gave me a full description of the image of what it was. It was a shop, it was blue and yellow, and it had a car park, and it had parking spaces and blah, blah, blah. And then what I did is I just pasted it back into Copilot and said, now create an image from this description anywhere that you found the word IKEA replaced with the word SharePoint, and then boom, it created the image that I was after. So I reverse engineered a way of actually getting an image that looked just like the IKEA store, but with the word SharePoint on it instead. Cool. There's no more questions in the Q&A, so I'm just going to move on to the next area, which is creating a pitch deck. Now, creating a pitch deck is essentially something that a lot of marketeers do on behalf of sales teams and things like that. Now, the prompt that I use for this is create a pitch deck that can be used by our sales team from this document. Now, before I actually got onto that particular prompt, I actually asked Copilot to say, what product documents do we have about our controlled documents product? So as I was saying before, our controlled documents product is a policy management type system. It's in SharePoint. And I've just asked it to say, please list out all the kind of product materials that you can find. And it found some really good kind of materials that we've previously created before, like a product sheet. But the product sheet is purely just a single page PDF type of thing. Or we've got this technical product sheet, which is much more about the kind of the fundamental kind of features and things like that. So there's a lot more kind of information in this document. Now, this document probably has all the information that we need to put into a pitch deck. But as I say, it would take us quite a lot of time to go and create the different slides, to copy and paste text over, things like that. So instead, I'm grabbing a copy link of the document and I'm going back into Copilot and I'm saying, please create a pitch deck that can be used by our sales team from this particular document. And then I paste in the URL that I've copied of that document. Now, something I skipped over before, but in the video, you will have seen that you can also do a / and start typing the name of a document as well if you wanted to, if you've recently been working with it. Now, what this is doing is it's then creating a draft outline of what this PowerPoint, this pitch deck will look like. Now, of course, in the real world, I'd probably want to refine this a little bit more, tell it to remove some of the slides, tell it to update some of the information, things like that. But if I'm happy with this, I can just say, please now turn this into a PowerPoint document. And it's going to take all of that information, all the suggestions of the slides that it's creating, and it's going to go and create me a PowerPoint document. Now, this is just going to be a kind of no thrills. This is just me creating it in 30 seconds type of thing. So it's not going to have our complete branding and colors and things like that. I could tell it if I wanted to say, please make it look like this particular PowerPoint if I wanted to. But you can see here now, it's actually gone away. It's created me my slides from what it was that I discussed with it inside of Copilot. Then all I would need to do is go and apply over the top any branding, colors, theme templates, things like that, that I might have already have loaded into my PowerPoint. So it makes it much quicker, much easier for us to actually go ahead and start creating those pitch decks from materials. But you can see that literally took me, what, 2 minutes to create? Now, obviously, I'd need to go through and maybe edit this a little bit more, remove things, add some imagery, blah, blah, blah. But as I say, if I told it to take a previous pitch deck and make it look like that other pitch deck, I could do that as another way of speeding it up. But speaking as somebody who's created PowerPoints for the past 10 years, I must have had years worth of my life that have gone into creating PowerPoints, and using Copilot makes things so much quicker, so much easier to create. So next is summarize. So summarizing FAQs. Sorry, summarizing and FAQs. Now, this is actually in the interface inside of OneDrive, but this same interface actually is coming to SharePoint as well. So we can select a document and say, please summarize it, and it'll give a key summary. So this is actually quite a large document. It's got maybe 100 pages in it, something like that, and it's actually been able to summarize it really well. I can also open up Copilot against this document and ask specific questions about this document. So I could say, does this product use version control? And it's come back and say, yes, this control documents product uses version control, and giving me the kind of information that I need. I could also say, please create an FAQ. So again, as a marketer, often we create web pages about our products, and at the bottom of those, we often have FAQs about the types of questions that people would typically want to ask about it. So we can generate all of this automatically using Copilot just at the click of a button. So as I say, we can use this to summarize the documents. We can even use Copilot to ask very specific questions about individual documents. Often marketing materials will require those FAQs, so we can easily generate those at a click of a button. It's also useful for the likes of an SEO type of blog. So at the bottom of kind of blog articles, there's often kind of like FAQs, but mostly it's about answering questions that people might be searching for on Google anyway. And this feature can be used on any document. It's not just marketing materials. Obviously, if you wanted to summarize a policy document, or if you wanted to summarize a process, or whatever it is, a document relates to a project, a client, it doesn't matter. That feature is still going to work exactly the same. So before we move on to the next category, I'm just going to quickly check Q&A, see if there's any questions in there. Can't see any in there, but if you do have any questions, guys, please do just drop them into the Q&A. So the next section is all about analysis hacks. So it's actually looking at how can we gather feedback, and then how do we do some analysis based on that feedback. So to do this, what I would recommend is that you look at using Microsoft Forms. So you might already be using Microsoft Forms, but it's worth knowing that you can actually use Copilot alongside Microsoft Forms to create your forms quickly. So you could say, for example, I want you to create a project feedback form for my company called Valto. We offer Microsoft services related to SharePoint, Microsoft Teams, Power Apps, Power BI, Copilot, Azure, and more. And then it's given it plenty of context, plenty of information about who we are, the types of projects we run. Obviously, in the real world, I'd probably add a couple more sentences to say what types of questions I wanted, the format of the questions, things like that. But we're using Copilot within Microsoft Forms to draft that form. So you can see literally in seconds, it's had a really good first draft. It's got a really good idea about what it is, the types of questions that I want to ask as part of my project feedback. I can refine this, so I could say I want you to create a project feedback form for a company, Valto, we offer, and then I've listed out all the services again. But I've also put, I want you to have questions related to what our customers enjoyed and what could have been improved. So there you go. You can see I'm refining this now. Now we can either refine the whole form, which is what this prompt is doing. It's refining the whole thing. It's going to regenerate the whole thing all over again, or we can choose just to create new sections or new questions within the form using Copilot, and that's something that we'll look at in a second. Now you can see it's redrafted the full form for me, and if I was happy with this now, I can just click on the keep it button, and that'll then create my form and all those fields automatically for me. So I can have a look here, see the questions in action, but I can also choose to add more using Copilot. So I can insert the Copilot, say I want you to add a rating of 1 to 10. Also, I don't know why I paused there, but also a free type box where I think this is what I'm saying. I'm asking them for a quote from them that we can maybe use on our website. Now, this is obviously understood the assignment. It's gone away and it's then created me 2 additional fields. I've got my rating, which is a star ratings 1 to 10. I've also got an additional box at the bottom where a customer can provide a quote. So as I say, we're using Copilot within Microsoft Forms. We've told the form what we want. We've specified the purpose of the form, and we've told it what fields we do and we don't want added into the form. We use Copilot to refine it and add more questions. And now we're looking at how it could look inside of a mobile phone or on a desktop computer. We can also share this as well. So when it comes to sharing, we can either sort of send people an email, we can generate a QR barcode, or we can even generate a embed if we wanted to embed this into, say, our public website as a form for people to then submit through. We can look at collecting responses. So I say by sharing a link, generating a QR barcode, which is fantastic if you wanted to put it onto like a poster or something like that, or as I embed it into a web page. Now, what I would also do before the next step is I would also make sure that you've put in plenty of fake data. So the next step, we're going to be looking at kind of doing a bit of analysis and things like that on this data using Copilot. But I would strongly suggest that you go in and put in some fake data before you do this. So before we move on to the next step, I'm just going to look to see if there's any questions so far. It looks like we've got 2 questions that have just come through. So let's look at those. Does Copilot offer way to judge its confidence in its answers, e.g. in its answers, your company policy states this, but this might be outdated or it's really old? Good question. So not native, as I redefine that. So you saw from its response before, it didn't give a kind of percentage. Now, the way that AI does work in the background is it always works on the percentage chance that it thinks that it's right. So quite often, if you look at the back end of an AI and the way that it works, it will come up with a whole bunch of ideas, just like a human brain, and then it will kind of order them into what's most likely the best response and then give that to you. Now, you can, if you're maybe a bit concerned about the response that it's giving, you can ask it, how certain are you? And I've had this in the past before when I've been researching something which doesn't have a lot of information about it, I've asked it to come back and actually put a percentage next to each item that it brought back to me of how certain it was that that was the correct answer, just so you can get an answer for that, but not natively. You have to kind of ask it how certain it is about something, like you were working with a colleague, essentially. Next question. I have received a form in Google Forms, but really wanted it in MS Forms. So could I paste the link into Copilot and ask it to recreate? No, I don't think so. I don't think it will work like that, because it's not going to have the full kind of visibility of that, because it's Google versus Microsoft at this point in time. What you could easily do, though, is you could, if you had a way of, say, getting the fields or the questions out of that particular Google form, and then just use Copilot to say, here, create a form, and here's all the fields that I want you to create. Or, as we've seen in here, it will probably have a good guess at it. So depending on what your form is, it will probably have a really good guess at what those fields would be anyway. So it might even be able to just create 80% of the form for you, and then you just customize those final questions that it didn't ask, it didn't enter for you. Cool. So let's move on to the next step. So the other thing is, before we look at the analysis, is the ability to boost responses with Copilot. So the cool thing about Copilot is it's literally getting integrated everywhere inside of Microsoft 365. So in the background of this form, we've got an option here which says boost responses with Copilot. So I can type in an email address or a group that I want to invite to basically give feedback using this Microsoft form, and then I can use Copilot to generate a couple of different ideas of what the prompt or the email that's sent to those people to remind them to submit this feedback form is. And in fact, actually, we can generate this multiple times, and we can also cycle through the different responses that Copilot's created to find the right tone of voice that we wanted to. We can also edit it as well if we wanted to, but I thought this was a really good way of showing you how Copilot is being used to help speed up little tiny processes. So even though it would have taken me only 30 seconds to write out a little message to somebody, it saved me that 30 seconds. But the more times we see this, we'll see this in more and more Microsoft products in time, that is going to help us save little bits of time here and there. So I say once we have had our few submissions, we can check on our responses, click in the collect responses. If we want to chase up some responses, we can use this boost responses with Copilot. We can specify who we want to send it to, and the message can be refined as well before we send them out. Copilot suggests improvements. So I struggled to title this one because you'll see there's quite a lot of information in this particular video. But all of the data that's submitted inside a Microsoft form goes straight into an Excel spreadsheet. Now, this isn't a great example because, as I say, I only had time to put in 5 examples into this data. It would work much better if we had a lot more data in here. But I can go into Excel and then I can use Copilot. And one of the things I think is really cool is it starts to understand more of the data. The more you use Copilot inside of the Excel spreadsheet, the more it understands about it. But there's an option here that says show a suggestion for a formula column. Now, the reason why I titled this one Copilot Suggested Improvements is because Copilot will help you improve your work over time. It'll understand the way that you're working and potentially surface something up to you in a way that you hadn't thought about it previously. In this case, it's saying show a suggestion for a formula column. Now, the formula column that it thinks would be really useful for this form, and actually it is really useful because it doesn't exist natively, is it's created for me a duration. So it's calculated the duration of each service interaction by subtracting the start time from the completion time. So now we can add in, just by click of a button, we've now added in a column here with all of the data, I should say, that it's calculated to figure out the duration time of how long it's taken to submit this particular form. Now, of course, this is really useful to me because then I can track over time how long it's taking people to submit the form. So Copilot will understand your data and what you're trying to do. It'll give you prompts about how you could improve the data you have. In this case, it's recognized that my data did not have a time duration of the form submission field. It suggested that I add this. That field is very useful to the feedback form as it allows me to understand how long it is taking people to complete and maybe should it be shorter. It is worthwhile looking at what other suggestions it has that could potentially improve your data. So this has actually provided me something that I didn't have before. It's calculated it based on the information I already had, and it's given me more information than I had previously before. Cool. The next step of this then is using Copilot in Excel to do some analysis. Now, I hold my hands up and I'm not the best with Excel. So I actually lean on Copilot quite a lot for doing analysis and insights and things like that. So I could use a prompt, say something like, please analyze the data from my project feedback form and provide some insights I might not have noticed. So I've asked Copilot to review the data and provide analysis and insights. Often AI can spot trends and patterns that humans would not be able to spot. Now, this is obviously quite easy because there's only sort of 5 rows of data in here, but it's actually spotted, say, that it's found that the ratings of the services are quite high. The average is somewhere between 8 and 10, and it's then plotted me a little graph to show over time how that data has been put together. And just by clicking on a little button say add into new sheet, it's then added it into an Excel spreadsheet tab for me. Now, I realize I'm almost out of time now, but I must tell you about our offer, which is the free Copilot readiness assessment. Now, this assessment, if you were to buy it directly from us, would be costing you £2,995, but it's completely free. And the reason why it's free is it's sponsored and fully paid for by Microsoft. So you can get your free assessment by contacting us using the link in the description of the video below. I'm also going to paste in into our chat area of this live event in a second the link of where you can get this. But if you're watching this on a recording on YouTube, the link is in the description below. As part of the report, what we do is we break this down into multiple areas. But the key kind of areas around security, so making sure your SharePoint is properly configured and there's going to be no security leaks that we were talking about earlier on. Licensing. Now, this isn't just making sure that you've got the best Copilot licenses and identifying maybe people that should have free Copilot licenses, people that should have the paid Copilot licenses, but we can also offer a free audit of all of the licenses that you have to see if Valto can actually provide you a cheaper set of licenses, saving you costs on your licenses. And then optimization, just making sure that actually you have your Microsoft 365 tenant properly configured from a security perspective, from a compliance perspective, from a IT architecture perspective, to make sure that everything's structured in the right way so that when Copilot is laid on top of it, you're going to get the best return on investment for it. Out of the back of this free assessment, you are going to get a summary report, which is going to have full recommendations on what you should do for all of these areas. Now, you can take this away and you can just action those yourself if you wanted to, or we can provide you a fixed price for Valto to resolve all of those issues for you to make sure that you're fully ready for Copilot. Plus, we can also offer you adoption packages, so train the trainer type of packages and full kind of as I say, we are adoption specialists, so we can make sure that you fully realize the return on investment that you're making into Microsoft Copilot. So if there's any final questions, please drop them into the Q&A area. I'm just going to be checking that over now to see if there's any final questions. Okay. So just drop the link as well for anyone who's watching this live who would like to book in your free Copilot readiness assessment. There's a link inside of the Q&A area that I've just published as well. And I'll just drop that into the chat area. So everyone's got that. Cool. Has anyone got any final questions? Or I'll be wrapping up in 30 seconds if there's no final questions. I think we have answered all the questions as we've gone along, to be fair. We'll just give it another 10 seconds just if there's any final questions. Realize we've run over time a little bit. Okay, cool. Well, there's no final questions. As I say, please use that link to contact us to book in your free Copilot assessment. We can run through any other questions if you haven't had them answered today during those assessments as well. And as I say, thank you very much for joining. There is another Copilot webinar, which is happening in a couple of weeks' time. So look out in your emails for an invitation, which is coming out very soon about that. And that is going to be a full run through essentially of how the consultants at Valto have been using Copilot and how we've adopted it internally at Valto. So I just want to thank you very much for joining today, and I hope to see you at the next webinar.